At Momentum, we focus a lot on helping people access waiver services. So we have a waiting list of about 20,000 families in Kentucky right now. And about the only way to access residential level services is if you have an emergency. So if your parent is declining or deceased, a primary caregiver rather, or if you have had loss of funding, loss of service, loss of housing, if you're currently institutionalized, and a few other things there. One of the things that we focus on at Momentum is helping families navigate when we end up with a crisis situation, because that's where we've fall into. How do we help siblings and aging parents navigate that process? So kind of writing the applications and doing those types of things.
Welcome back to Finding Common Ground with Heather and Steve. Today we have a disability support strategist with us. Her name is Samantha Harrison. Steve, how did you meet Samantha?
Well, I'm trying to think. I think it was back in September, right, Samantha? I think it was early September when I first met you and reached out. I found you on LinkedIn. I liked what I saw, especially because you're in the disability world, and because we were Heather and I are branching out to get takes on how people do it in other areas, and not just New York, but also different states. So I think a lot of the issues that we see are very common across the states, and so we're always reaching out and looking for families and professionals and providers that are in different parts of the country. And I saw you, and we talked quite a bit in length about what I think I probably did most of the talking back then about some of the initiatives that we're doing in New York, but I was very interested in what you were doing too. And I wasn't sure what your title is a disability. Go ahead. I'll let you explain it.
Yes, well, disability support strategist. I'm the founder of Momentum Family Strategies. We support families, specifically siblings and aging parents, with navigating life after mom and dad for adults with developmental disabilities.
That's a heavy topic, but such a needed one. Really,
Yes.
it's the question we all have: what will happen when we're not here, and who's going to step up and take that role? So, what led you there? It's such a niche, like how did you end up where you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah. I had a lot of friends in high school with a variety of disabilities. And when it came time to graduate, several people came to me and said, "Hey, would you want to become a paid employee for my son?" And I was like, "That's weird." They're my friends. I don't want to get paid to do that. Of course, I didn't know anything about self-direction or anything at that time. And I remember taking a 50-page packet home that was, how you sign up to be a self-directed employee in Kentucky, and sitting on my parents' couch thinking, is this what you have to do to get your child services like this? I had filled out probably 2 job applications at that point in my life. But I looked at that and was just like, this is too much for me, let alone everything that this person has going on trying to support their son. And I eventually decided that I just wanted to be his friend, and I didn't take that job. And after the 3rd or 4th time that a family came to me and said, "Hey, would you consider this?" I thought, well, I must be called to do this, let me give it a go, and just kind of fell into self-direction that way. I worked as a DSP for several years, and eventually met someone who lived in her own apartment, had an entirely self-directed life with a large team of supporters. And the person that helped her coordinate all of that with all the hiring and things left, and it was just us. So we're kind of looking at each other like, we got to figure this out. So I just also stumbled into recruiting and hiring and self-direction.
That's so cool. So Steve and I talk about that role a lot and for New York, because we don't really have a sustainability piece, like a staff member our budget doesn't allow for somebody who's going to help us set up the house while we're here and get it going and maintain the staff and the schedule, and then take over when we're not there. That's the biggest thing that we're advocating for in New York right now. So is there an actual budget line in Kentucky for this? Like, how does this work? Do you become like a lead team member? I'm just curious how it plays out.
Yeah, so in Kentucky, there is not a lead team member. There is not hardly a functional support brokerage service. So we do have something here called Community Guide, which is similar to support broker. Kentucky is one of the few states that chose to name Community Guide for that service. We have over 13,000 people self-directing in Kentucky, but only about 100 have access to that service. So there's about,
Wow.
yeah, there's about 600 people that are currently eligible to receive a support worker community guide service. However, only about 100 of them are currently being served because we have a lot of limitations on the provider rules, and it's really hard for people to get started here.
Wow. That's good perspective to have. What do you think, Steve?
I don't even know where to begin because we thought New York was pretty tough. You guys might be farther behind in what we are. We have fiscal intermediaries. We have, of course, support brokers handling our self-direction, and we have issues. But I think we have a lot more brokers in our area than what you guys. You're saying that's for the whole state?
So
100?
to be clear, we have 100 people with disabilities being served. We have
Okay.
about 10 support brokers for the whole state.
Wow. So what's I'm going to use a weird word like juggernaut. Like what's tying it up? Like
Yeah.
what's going wrong? Like why aren't there more? In New York, there's
Yeah.
a lot of parents and family members that became brokers because we understood it and we were
Mhm.
obviously highly motivated to make it work. Is there a barrier for that in Kentucky?
There's many. I wrote a white paper on it. I'd be glad to share it with you guys sometime.
Yeah, definitely.
We struggle in a variety of areas, but what I say Kentucky really struggles with most is education for all of self-direction. We are educating people on what self-direction is. We are not telling people that this is an incredible opportunity for you to have more choice, control, flexibility, and freedom, but it's also running a small business. So we have families come into this looking for an alternative, but not realize the amount of responsibility they have. And then we turn around and blame the family for not understanding or not doing it right or what have you. And so education is the core of it. People aren't aware of the service. But the reason that there's not a strong provider network is because we're very afraid of duplicative services here. And of course, we don't want that to happen. But Kentucky is concerned about case management and the support broker role being the same. Part of that is that our regulations include case management to do some of those duties. So it seems to be that we thought case management can handle both pieces. That is not
Wow.
happening.
Well,
You
it's hard for
know,
case managers to do just the other things you have to do. I mean, to like recert your Medicaid and make sure you have your other services in line. I mean, our care managers, there's a high turnover rate in New York too. So you're getting new people. So that would be really hard if your budget was directly tied to that person and they were always changing.
they are expected to help with the recruiting and hiring if there is not a community guide added on. There's been a lot of language around that community guide role. You will see it listed with parentheses optional next to it, which is fine. Not everyone has to have a community guide, but it seems like it's just bottom of the list. Like, well, if you can find somebody. For the longest time, I was one of the only people providing it here. And so if you heard, to come to me, then that's really where we were. And it oftentimes has turned into the most complex needs, people who can't be served by our traditional service system because of behaviors or whatever other reason. And we're doing what we like to call here self-direction by necessity. So there is no other option. We're just going to have to make that work. And the case manager basically flips open the regulations and goes through every service and says, what else am I not using here? Because we're desperate. And that's really how the community guide service worked here for a long time. Thankfully, with some really great advocacy in the last couple of years, we now have three incoming agencies that are going to provide the community guide service. So we're up to about 10 folks serving people here, and we have about 100 people currently receiving that support broker-like service.
That's great.
Samantha, is there like we have a state agency that oversees everything? Is it similar in Kentucky? Do you have a governing that's trying to help you find support brokers and to make sure these community guides are put in place?
So I don't know that we have the interest to support it necessarily here. I think the interest is really just tied back to the case manager is supposed to do that. And so we have a lot of conversations and education and advocacy around there are three roles that are supposed to be supporting successful self-direction: case management, support broker, and financial services, right? Financial management. And in Kentucky, we just assume that the support broker and case manager will be done by one person, and it's not happening. But when we do ask for change, we've gotten some individual people in our governing agencies interested, and we're grateful for that support. But there has not been an overarching united front to really instill this service in Kentucky.
Wow. That's a lot to digest because I just think about
Yeah.
we have over 30,000 people who self-direct in New York State. It is hard to find a broker sometimes, and to find a broker that really knows how to maximize what you can do with your budget. There might be
Right.
somebody who knows how to fill out the form. And that's what I was thinking the breakdown would be, like setting up the budget, because the FI and the broker should be separate as a checks and balance. You don't want the person writing the check to be the same person who's setting up the budget. Like they're supposed to be, these
Hmm.
different elements to it. So
Right.
does the care manager then take on that role of making the budget, or is it different in Kentucky?
So Kentucky is different. We bill services by units instead of a budget. So my understanding is in New York, it's more of a dollar-based program where people have an amount they can spend and they choose what services they need based on that.
Okay.
And then here in Kentucky, we have a certain number of hours associated to that service. So, for example, for a one-on-one support person, what we call personal assistance, a lot of people that are receiving residential services could have up to 16 hours a day of that service. It's not a dollar amount.
Okay.
For the community guide, you can have up to 144 hours per plan year. But again, there's a maximum rate, so you could get to a dollar amount, but we don't say you have $6,000. We say you get up to 144 hours here.
Okay. That's kind of interesting. I don't know. What do you think of
Yeah.
that? What do you think of that, Steve? Like, I'm trying to think, is that better? It might be. I'm not sure.
Do you find that they max out the 144 hours?
Yes. Which is interesting
Mhm.
because I believe that New York has almost a third of that. It's around 50 hours. Is that right? For
It
support brokers?
I was gonna say, our brokers do not get that much time. Even if we've opened up a self-directed home and we're trying to, be outside of mom and dad's home and be in our own place, what we're
Mm-hmm.
finding is you usually have enough budget money to cover staffing and daily activities, or staffing and housing, but not
Mm-hmm.
all of it. So either you can live at home with mom and dad and have money to do other things, or you can live in your own place and stay at home. Like there's
Right.
not a lot of wiggle room when the amount in our budgets hasn't changed. So let's step
Yeah.
back for a second and think about a typical person that you might support. What does it look like in Kentucky? I love for us to have these takeaways where, like, we can all complain about how the systems are broken. I mean, they are in every state, but what's working, would you say, or what are your goals, like your mission in Kentucky? And it's easy to do when you're just talking through somebody that you've helped.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's working well is that we do have people who are able to live either in their family home, if that's what they choose, or in their own home and have the support that they need to do both. They can live in their own home and then also be able to go out and do things, which is wonderful. They can live at home with mom and dad and also be able to have support to go out and do things as well. So I support people in both situations, and we see folks less often that have their own places, but the folks that we do have living on their own are really living wonderful lives.
Oh, good.
In your typical workday,
Hmm.
what would that consist of?
Yeah, so right now at Momentum, we focus a lot on helping people access waiver services. So we have a waiting list of about 20,000 families in Kentucky right now. And about the only way to access residential level services is if you have an emergency. So if your parent is declining or deceased, a primary caregiver rather, or if you have had loss of funding, loss of service, loss of housing, if you're currently institutionalized, and a few other things there. Those are really the only reason that you're able to get residential services unless you're on the waiting list for 20 years, And so one of the things that we focus on at Momentum is helping families navigate when we end up with a crisis situation, because that's where we've fallen to. How do we help siblings and aging parents navigate that process? So kind of writing the applications and doing those types of things.
I was teaching a housing class, and one of the things that we had people do was write a letter of intent.
Mhm.
which usually goes along with a will. And it was such an interesting exercise for the audience. If you don't know what that is, you're basically almost leaving an instruction manual for the people who are left, to take your place or be the next in line for your loved one. And it was a hard assignment for people to do, to really think about, what are the things I do without thinking about it? What are the things that are being done that don't get paid to be done, but that my loved one needs done? Um, and it seems like that's an important exercise for people. Do you find, I think, Steve, you had that one law firm in Velocity, and they were talking about only 1 in 4 people actually have a will written up. And if you're in the special needs world, it's actually worse because we just don't know what to put on that piece of paper, so we don't do it. And I'm actually in that boat. I'm going to be really vulnerable. I have not attempted it. I know I need to. So why don't we dive in there? Like, what do you think are good steps for families in that situation?
For sure. So, one of the things that we have found in exploring this life after mom and dad navigation is that we really need to go back to basics and think about the who, what, when, where, and why. And of course, we always hear those words in a certain order, but it's really important when we're planning for the future to start with the why. So, what is the vision for your loved one's life, and why do you want that to be so? And really start documenting what works well and what doesn't, and walk through each of those sections to really put together a comprehensive plan, which can be done as part of your letter of intent. But I think people say too often, "Hey, go write a letter of intent," and people are thinking, "I'm going to write a letter to so and so." And what we've really missed is, do we really have a mission and a vision for what this person's future will look like when I'm not here? What is that now? And what does it need to look like in the future?
I'm part of a group of family networks. And so we've kind of like found each other, and we're forming our own family network so we can support each other. There's no funding for it. Other
Hmm.
places do it, like in Canada, and I think Michigan and Wisconsin has models like that. Is there anything for the families to come together in Kentucky, like just to learn from each other? We often learn best from people who are in it with us, and especially from other families that are, have walked the path maybe ahead of us.
Yeah. So we do have parent groups here, similar to other states. We have a Central Kentucky ARC. We do not have a statewide ARC in Kentucky. We have a couple of autism groups, a few Down syndrome groups, that kind of a thing. We don't have anything specifically for self-direction, which is something that we're hoping to get going. One of the things that a lot of folks that live in their own homes that are self-directing struggle with is meeting other people that are self-directing. And we hear from case management, well, we can't introduce you to them because of HIPAA. Okay, but if we're both consenting, like it's a conversation about, hey, I have some folks that would like to meet other people that are hiring their own employees. Would you be interested in that? I can't get in line with, we can't introduce you because of HIPAA. And so I'm hoping that we can find a way to form a group that can pull people in, maybe in a less, more community-minded focus, I will say. Yeah.
Mhm.
Samantha, I want to go back to that what you talked about with the emergency situation to get to the top of the list. That's how New
Yeah.
York model is run. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it seems backwards in so many ways. And it pushes the people that have been waiting for 10, 15, 20 years down further. Now they're waiting even longer because everybody's, eventually going to be in an emergency situation, and the ones on the
Right.
list aren't going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that's
Exactly.
the same way in Kentucky.
That yes, and we have very little movement until there is an emergency situation, even if you've been on the list. I mean, there are people that do receive slots, that have been waiting for a while, but it certainly does seem that way here. Yes.
One of the things that I feel like is a national conversation is the people who support our loved ones. So our direct support professionals, our paid caregivers, POM, respite, they're called so many different things.
Mm.
But the wage that many of them make, I think that at the federal level, there was a study that said that 50% of the people who do that type of position qualify for government assistance. It
Mm-hmm.
just feels like, if that's true, we're not valuing this group of people. We're not making them a priority. And it's just going to be a short job, like a stepping stone for most people. They're not going to stick with it because there's not a path forward to make that really a livable career. Is that consistent in Kentucky, or are there workarounds that you guys have come up with?
Yeah, there's a couple things. So we do see DSPs in general struggling, to make ends meet with the wages, especially at our traditional providers. With self-direction, it can be a little bit easier for folks here. On our residential waiver program, the current maximum rate is $26.52 an hour, which, is a fair wage, I would like to say, for where we are in Kentucky. Of course, times are tough everywhere, and we all need to be thinking about, what income looks like. But I don't hear a lot of pushback on the wages for our self-direction programs there. We had struggled with respite in previous years. It was at $13 an hour or approximately, and we just bumped that to 20, I believe it's 21.30 now. So that almost doubled the rate there because we were so far behind. And so finding respite has been a little bit easier. It's not quite the $27 an hour, but it is, somewhat competing compared to 13, right? So that's gotten a lot easier. The thing that I hear the most from families here is health insurance. So there is not an option here for any kind of self-direction dollars to go towards employee health insurance or anything like that. I don't foresee that changing in Kentucky anytime soon, but I did hear a family recently talk about how they had set out money from a life insurance policy that would fund a special needs trust. And they gave specific instructions that part of those funds would be used to help pay health insurance premiums for their employees in the future, which I thought was a very innovative idea.
And Steve, that's families solving the problem, right? They're like,
It always
because
comes back to us.
yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
It's just, there's so many things circling in my brain. And what I want the audience to appreciate is, I'm sure you've hit some brick walls sometimes. We're all trying to move mountains and make strange systems work. And not every parent is innovative, right? They might just be really tired and exhausted from life. And they might not have thought of that kind of workaround or that strategy. And for the people like you supporting families in that situation, how do you not burn out? Like, how do you keep going? Do you have any words of advice or stories about that?
Yeah, so it's been a journey to get here, but starting out, when I left the consulting firm that I worked for a few years ago, I really wanted to get the community guide support broker equivalent service off the ground here, and so I set out with the national knowledge that I had and looked at everything that was wrong with that service, wrote a white paper, and said, Kentucky, this is what we need to do to fix these things, and I pushed that along for a couple of years with a few really strong supporters in our state government, but there wasn't enough support there to make it a sustainable service in the long term. Several pieces to that, but one of them is, as a community guide service provider, you can't provide any other service to any participant in
Oh,
Kentucky, which really locks you in. And that also includes if you are an independent support broker here, you could not provide respite or ComHab or anything else to another person. So where I really feel like we struggle is that we are not using our existing workforce of people who know self-direction, because they have someone that they've been supporting with ComHab or with respite for a long time in many cases. We hope that retention is there, right? But when someone really is invested in a person that's receiving support and knows our system well, they've probably been around for a long time, and they're probably not interested in leaving that person to go provide a different service. That's a relational thing. And so we oftentimes decide that it's more important to have conflict free, as opposed to, say, in most states where you could provide respite to that person that you've known for a long time and also provide the community guide support broker service to other people. So that's been a pretty significant barrier. We've gotten really far in trying to navigate that. And the last piece, Kentucky said, yes, we're going to fix that. And they put in the application to Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services the corrected language, but left the old language in. And
oh,
so now we've been a year asking them to issue guidance that says we can provide more than one service, and we still don't have that letter of guidance. And
oh,
so
yeah.
we got to the summer and I was like, I think we're really going to have to look at something a bit different. And that's when I started looking at the folks that are most commonly coming for this support broker service are often families that have siblings taking over the next phase for life after mom and dad. And in order to kind of deal with some of the burnout as a professional, I've really started building based on technology and systems that I'm not seeing in our social service space. So using a CRM and things that are not taught to social workers like they should be has really taken a lot off of my plate in terms of administration, which is allowing me to spend better quality time with the families that I serve.
That's great. Samantha, on your LinkedIn site, you mentioned that you like to solve stuff that keeps families up at night. And Heather and I both have children, and my son is 35 years old, and I worry about what happens to him when something if something were to happen to me. You say you're doing end of life work for families. Can you explain a little bit about what you're trying to do with that piece?
Sure. So we are most commonly supporting siblings who are transitioning to be that successor or primary caregiver. So when mom and dad are no longer able, either they're no longer physically or cognitively able, or they're gone now, helping siblings get caught up with, hey, what's Social Security? What's this paperwork I have to fill out? What do you mean I have to hire the employees? Things that may or may not have gotten communicated, but when you're sitting in the driver's seat and going, we have to have somebody tomorrow, it's a totally different reality, right? So we're working a lot with siblings who are in that role to help coach them up and give them the skills and tools they need to be successful.
And I'm sure the loved ones, that are left behind, they don't want to lose everything that they have either and be forced into a more institutional setting. If they've been at home with mom and dad or living in their own apartment with mom and dad's support and their self-direction staff, that they don't want to lose their parents and then lose their freedom and their choice. So thank you for what you do. I mean, it is such an important job.
Yeah, it's everything that we do is to support siblings so that they can help their loved ones live their best life. And it's been an interesting turn of events to get here because I thought that I would always provide direct service. And I still do work with some individuals that are their own representatives for their waivers and things like that. And that's a real treat to get to do that too. But I am so glad that we're able to really serve these siblings that are trying to figure out what's next when there hasn't been a lot of resources directed in their way.
Right.
Yeah, Samantha, Heather and I work with families and advocate for families all over the state. And we hear all the time about what's going to happen. Like I was mentioning, that what happens when we're gone. What if they don't have siblings? What direction are you taking then?
Sure. Yeah. So it's, working to build out who's next in that care team, right? We see siblings, we see aunts and uncles, and I use siblings kind of as a general term, but whoever that next successor caregiver is, sibling feels a little bit more accessible than successor caregiver when we're talking about these things. But, figuring out what support we can provide to whoever that next person is. And then, of course, there are cases where there is not someone else, and that's a special situation that we have to evaluate what is it that person needs and what things are out there to be able to support that. I do feel like we have a pretty significant gap in self-direction where when we have people who do not have someone next to take over as their representative or those types of things, we don't have a really great option for that right now. And I'm hoping that as a country, we can work towards that in the future to figure out what that representative role could look like when there isn't someone directly in their network.
Right. When you don't have those unpaid supports. The one program, that family network, the family governed networks that I had referenced before, they will pool their resources. The parents come together, they are assisting each other, they're teaching the next in lines. That's what they call their successors, the next in lines. They all are there, and it's multi-generational. So some people have, loved ones in their 50s and some are, in their 20s, and we're all learning from each other, but we pool our resources and we buy connectors as part of our budget. And the connector's whole job, they're a bridge builder. They see who in the community responds to the loved one, who is naturally drawn to them, and who would be a great support that doesn't need to be paid. Because what
Mm.
we've found when we do our research is that if you're only surrounded by people who are paid to hang out with you and spend time with you, no matter how wonderful those people are, it's just not the same level of fulfillment. There's still an isolation piece to it. That's something to look at for Kentucky, that family governed network model. It doesn't take a whole bunch of extra money. It's not
Right.
but if everybody chips in some of their time from their budget, some of their funds, or however the point system
Yeah.
or hour system that you're using, then
Yeah.
maybe you could hire somebody who works with all 8 of your families, and it's an
Hmm.
actual job. And I think
Yeah.
that's what the sustainability piece is, creating a budget line where we can actually hire people who this becomes their job. And if you think about the agencies, they're closing down the certified options. Those people have a skill set that we could be using in a different way, where we still have the autonomy and control over what our life looks like. They have the expertise of how to run a house, how to keep staff, how to manage a schedule. So just some little nuggets there to, roll around in your
Yeah.
brain and think about. I think that's how we come up with our best ideas, talking to people from different places. So,
For sure. I think that's an incredible opportunity to be able to pool things. And I'd love to talk to Kentucky about what that could look like here. We are so individualized, and it's that, we're stuck on that limit. We've been working hard on trying to expand the natural support training opportunity here. And it seems like these days, anytime we present an innovative solution, it's that's not going to fit our regulations kind of situation. But I'm curious to know, what there could be some opportunity for, slightly outside of the system. So maybe on a goods and services basis. And so goods and services has been significantly underutilized in Kentucky for a long time. It used to be that people would use that to buy personal care supplies. And if you need personal care supplies, you know that those are very expensive. And so that ate the budget very quickly for a long time. About 5 years ago, they changed that. And now trying to get a good or service approved is exceptionally difficult. And so I recently heard that when they were initially bringing self-direction to Kentucky, the grant funding that was available to do that was almost taken away because Kentucky was resistant to implementing goods and services to begin with. And that was super eye-opening to me because could still, almost 25 years later, are having problems getting the basic good or service that someone should have the right to purchase with their budget approved, which is just wild. So I'm hoping we can make some headway on that in the future.
yeah, wow. That, it's very eye-opening. So,
Yeah.
anywhere in the country, you have the right to appeal. I'm just saying that
Right.
out loud for our audience
Yes.
and for you, because they might not
Yes.
give you a notice of decision. Now, if they change your
Yes.
SNAP benefit and they reduce it by a few dollars, you can appeal it. You can go to a fair hearing and you can say, I need the full amount. But for
Mhm.
some reason, with self directed budgets, people don't know they can appeal the decision. They can say, I don't agree with the fiscal person. I want my money, that I want access to it. This is how I want to spend it. Now, is that process easy? Absolutely not.
Right.
It takes a long time, but are parents pushing back in that way in your state? Are they trying to make that legal effort? Because sometimes that's what changes the precedent and the policy.
For sure. I have not seen a lot of families that are in a space to push back here on those types of things. There's certainly been a few that I've walked with. But one of the things that we see is that, our financial management or the fiscal intermediary groups are given so much power from our Department for Medicaid, and Department for Aging that oversee self-direction here, that it's basically anything goes. And so we have, just very similar to New York, our fiscal intermediaries are spread across the state, and they're kind of small shops, and they are allowed to all have different, rules and things. And so what you might see in one area of the state is different than another. And that's a lot of times where I've seen some appeals happen is, hey, we know someone else was able to get this thing. We found out about it. Now we're going to make sure that we can get it for our loved one. That's where I've seen that happen so far.
Wow. In your position, you can definitely encourage people to take those steps.
Yes.
Sometimes it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable and it's not easy, but sometimes that's the only way forward.
Yeah.
We're wrapping up. So we're just wondering, like, what comes next for you? What's in the near future? What are your goals? what can we like tune in and find out about you in a little while, like
Yes.
what do you got
Yes.
cooking?
Yeah, we've got a lot of things cooking here at Momentum Family Strategies. We are working on building out a waiver academy to help families get up to date on some of the waiver education that we're missing here. We have a membership-based podcast that is for families specifically based on regulations in Medicaid in Kentucky, and that's going to be growing stronger in 2026. We're looking forward to that. And then we're having some conversations with some other folks in New York about some needs that really could use some support. And so on the horizon, I hope that we'll be able to be operating in some other states to support families with life after mom and dad. So,
And in turn, we expect to be bringing some initiatives to Kentucky that Heather and I are working on.
yes.
I think you already know about the ability bus that we're doing.
Yes.
And we're looking at a rec center, similar to the autism barn we got here. So
Yeah.
we're looking for Kentucky and all the states. So there'll probably be some collaboration. And you know what? And when it's all said and done, that community and that sense of collaboration and partnerships with not just here locally and where I am and Heather is in Rochester is, but everywhere, because it's similar. It's obvious that we're all have a lot of the same needs, the same issues, the same crises, the same problems. And I think if we
Mm-hmm.
get together and put our heads together, we can find some solutions to some of this stuff.
There's so many local
Absolutely.
and state level like groups that get together. But I always think about, wouldn't it be nice if we had representatives from the different areas and states, like the people who had figured it out, who are doing more with less? Like, I want them to come and I want to benchmark with them. I can't tell you how many people we talk to that say that they have a loved one who lives in Massachusetts. They live out of state. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what Massachusetts is doing. It's not all the same school that these children are being sent to, but they have figured something out. They are doing something we can't do in our state. And instead of separating families and sending them far away, we should be learning from each other. So thank you for coming
Yeah.
on the show. Sometimes just sharing insights, like it sparks something, you think of it and you're like, I didn't even know that was a way to do it. You don't know it till you hear it. So
Right.
really appreciate that, Samantha. And I wish you the best of luck with this business because it's so needed. It sounds like there's
Yes.
not a lot of you. So maybe
Yeah.
you'll
Yes.
inspire more community guides to join the good fight. And it's not duplicative to be immersed in the disability community. It to give respite to some people, be a broker for others. That's just common sense. If you are that invested in a certain population, let us do what we do, right? Like naturally what we want to do and support people. My advice to you is just to keep pushing because it seems like you're going to, number one. I don't have to tell you to keep
Yes.
pushing, but it's the way you find the solutions and knock on the doors that people don't expect you to knock on. In New York State, when we ally with like the Office of Mental Health, or even when we push into like the Office of the Aging or look at veteran services, they have different funding streams, different rules, and sometimes the needs of our population are the same. And why not
Mhm.
pool resources and pull from what works in other areas? So just another idea. Steve, any words of
Yes.
wisdom?
Look, it's obvious that we can find common ground with some of these solutions. The same thing in Kentucky, the same thing in New York is a common ground here. And if we can find a way to, like I said earlier, work together to find some common ground and fix some of this stuff, I think the cavalry is going to be all of us here.
It is.
Absolutely. And Samantha, I want to make sure we include your contact information in our podcast description. But real quick, you want to let the audience know where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at momentumfamilystrategies.com and links to all of our socials will be there. I'm also on LinkedIn, would be happy to connect with folks that are looking to learn some more things about life after mom and dad. If there's anything that I could do to support any of you, I'm happy to do so. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks for coming
Samantha.
and joining us. Very nice. Until next time.
Continue the conversation by joining our Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, please join our supporters club. Subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your favorite listening app, but most of all, share it with your friends. Just one more click or comment can make a huge difference and help us to continue finding common ground.